everything from blogs to white papers to ebooks are always great, and they're really good standard content. But then there's also video, right? Like video content that you can use to repurpose with, like you said, pulling out little clips that we can put on LinkedIn ads or conversational ads that really pulling the people's attention. I think is so important, especially nowadays. Our attention span is so short. So really like catering to that and just getting to the point and taking out all the fluff so that we're not just talking at them, but talking to them in a way where it's resonating. It's like if a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, like, did it actually happen, right? It's that kind of thing. I can create a bunch of content, but if I'm not pushing it out into the platforms and the channels that my audience is spending their time in, then no one's going to go ahead and look at that content.
Welcome to Future Fuzz, the digital marketing podcast.
All right, welcome in. I am Vince Quinn. And today we are talking about using content to support the buyer journey. And joining us for this conversation is Sara Ceballos. She is the Director of Marketing at Inspectiv. Sara, welcome to Future Fuzz.
Thank you for having me.
Happy to have you. You've got a great, for the audio audience, Sara has like a great bright pink sweater on, a nice turtleneck. I decided to match the colored vibe. So my background is the same. We've got a good energy going. I mean, look, content gets me giddy, right? I live in podcasting. I love podcasting. So when we're talking about podcasting, content in general, and business, this gets me excited. But before I go off the rails, let me keep it on track here. First off, just give people some background. What is Inspectiv? What kind of work do you do there?
Of course. Well, thank you for having me again. So Inspectiv offers continuous testing for security teams. We make sure that they're enabled to launch applications securely so that when they go to market, we're keeping the internet safe as much as we can and supporting our very small, lean teams with enterprise level solutions.
Yeah. And so with that, I mean, for you, Director of Marketing, that means you got to get people in the door, right? So so understanding your team and the approach to these campaigns, I mean, on a top level, you're getting ready to put a campaign together for the company. What are the kinds of things that you're starting to consider when you do that?
I mean, that's a great question. So a lot of things go into consideration when we're looking at content, looking at campaigns. I like to think of it as a kind of puzzle that I'm putting together. Content isn't just, a blog or an article that we're pushing out. There needs to be a really strategic thought behind that and intention. The first step is really understanding our audience. Like, what are their actual pain points? What are their challenges? What are we trying to solve? And how can we talk to them in an empathetic way where we're resonating with them? So that's the first step. And then comes the second part, which is, where does that fit into the buyer's journey? So I like to start with mapping out our content, where it fits right now, like what webinars or white papers do we have and where do they fall in the journey? What gaps do we have? And then how do we fill that? And so once we kind of identify that, the next step is working with sales to understand what they're hearing in conversations that we can use to implement it into a cohesive content strategy and campaign.
Yeah, so I want to just really break all of this down is kind of where I want to go for today. And let's start with this from the idea of all of this content that you are going to make, you want to come up with a plan for it, right? And I had a conversation with somebody literally earlier today about this kind of thing where they're a coach and they wanted to make this content that was going to educate some of the people about mindset, some of their clients about mindset changes and how to deal with that. And I said to them, I'm like, okay, that's cool. Why do you want to make this? Right? What do you want the actual result of this kind of thing to be, right? Because I think it's so important to all of this stuff. You want to make things, these are cool ideas. This is interesting. This is fun. I'm really passionate about this topic. I want to talk about this all day. For me, I can talk about anything all day. But when it comes to all of that and you boil it down, it's ultimately, what is the purpose of this? What are you looking to accomplish with it? And I'm sure in the same thing when you're thinking about buyer's journey, right? First off, it's okay, you're analyzing this overall process. So I will have to backtrack a little bit and talk about a little more about that analysis, but then the intent, right? So what do you think about when it comes to intent for content with you? What are some of those things that you're considering and how it fits into the buyer's journey?
I mean, when it comes down to it, you need to meet the buyer where they are in their journey. And sometimes people kind of skip stages, right? It's not always a lateral move. And so you want to make sure that we're intentional with the content that we're pushing out and that we're solving those problems that they need. If it's maybe someone at the very top of the journey where they're just trying to learn about different solutions that can help them. So how do we put like very top of funnel thought leadership content to kind of educate them before you start really selling your company and selling yourself to those audiences? You need to make sure that they're educated into what you do and make sure that you're validated and that you're representing yourself as a thought leader in this space. And then another thing too, when it comes to intent, if there's folks that are down, in the maybe the bottom of funnel where they're ready to whip out their credit card and they're trying to analyze solutions, how do we use our customers to tell that story for us and have some proof points and value points that they can use to say, all right, Inspectiv is a good solution for us, and this is why we should work for them. So just looking at different content from like different perspectives, I think is so important.
Oh yeah, it's everything, right? I mean, for those top line people, yeah, you don't want to get them something that is like truly hardcore in the weeds and dense if they don't even really
Exactly.
fully understand the problem, right? Like that, it is such a common thing, and I'm sure you're seeing that for the kind of work that Inspectiv is doing, right? Where you're talking about all this AppSec and everything into that, like that is a complicated, nuanced space. And so
Exactly.
people, your average person might not even understand that that's what they need, but then they see it and they're
Mhm.
like, oh my God, this is it. So clearly, yeah, there is like this very simple top line educational stuff. And then there is the deeper level of, okay, well now you get it and you understand, and you have some basic terminology, and let's accelerate this. But I guess I would love to zoom out a little bit then
Sure.
and reset just on the idea of like, how do you chart a buyer's journey? You know what I mean? Like for the people
Yeah.
who are like, this sounds great. I'd love to like plan this stuff out a little bit more. It's not as regimented as I'd like it to be. I mean, how do you even begin to create that process and develop it?
For sure. So, a couple steps. I think there's a couple things that go into it. The first is looking at your data. What is the data telling you? For us, we have a marketing dashboard that has reporting on different stages of the journey. Like, where are they at the very top? What are their conversion rates? So, looking at the data there to see, all right, we're seeing that a lot of people are coming into our website and signing up for a newsletter, but they're not converting down here and they're not requesting a meeting with sales. And at the end of the day, North Star is always meetings with sales, pipeline that we're influencing, and revenue that we're bringing in. Like that is my North Star for everything that I'm doing. And so looking at the data to tell me, all right, if there's people that we're dropping, that we're losing within this part of the funnel, then like we need to solve for that. And so then looking at the content itself and identifying what persona it's talking to, and then where in the journey it falls under. That was like one of the first things that I did when I came to Inspectiv is I took a look at all of our content, our blogs, our white papers, ebooks, and then identified where they were. And then once you have kind of like a bird's eye view on both the data, what the data is telling you, and the content, then you're able to identify gaps, right? And then that drives the strategy for content creation, campaign enablement, and promotion.
Yeah, which makes so much sense to back up at all of this stuff, which is so important, right? I think
Mhm.
one of the beautiful things about content when it's truly done well is the paths that you understand, the paths that you're taking people on, and ways that you can further incorporate the stuff that you make into other parts of the ways that you engage with people, right? So when it's like, okay, well, we've made these different videos and now we have a series of blogs and we're going to incorporate that into those blogs because we're really driving people to the website. So now they're going to the website, they're seeing the blog, they're checking the video, they're going to our YouTube channel. Like, it's just there's so many layers that can really go into it. And I think it is such a help. Like for me, I'm visual. I tend to look at these things and I will literally chart it out. I will draw like almost nonsensical looking graphs and things of like Venn
Yes.
diagrams and stuff. Like it's how I process information. But to be able to step back and go, okay, these are all the different ways that people tend to engage with it. Here's how
Mhm.
we're giving them content based on how they're approaching us. And then, I mean, have all the data behind that. Like, what a beautiful mix of everything, because it's not just vibes, which I think a lot of content can be,
Yes.
So to have that scientific and art together is really what it's all about.
For sure. And I am a total attribution nerd. I love attribution. I love reporting. So I always like to look at, all right, what channels are we seeing these conversions, right? Is it social engagement like that that's driving people to our blog, that's driving XYZ? Is it our email? Is it third-party advertising? So really getting a look at, like you said, on a chart level, on like a reporting level where you're seeing, all right, email works really well for top of funnel, but it doesn't work very well down here. It helps us just kind of make informed decisions and learn about our audience. So that's when you layer in like UTM links and lead source and all of that, just to really understand, because the more data that you can collect and the more that you're able to understand where your audience is spending their time in, then you can go ahead and implement that into your content strategy.
Future Fuzz is sponsored by SalesSource, B2B pipeline management and sales growth for your business.
Yeah, which is huge, because one of the things that I've been really big on is the idea of understanding like ecosystem and numbers when it comes to content. Because part of it is people will look at me and go with the podcast like, hey, I've made this podcast and I'm getting 30 downloads per episode and I need a whole lot more. And it's like, yeah, like let's get you more for sure.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
beyond that, it's also like, well, you're also getting this content and you're putting it on LinkedIn. You're getting all of these clips from that and people are seeing that. And it's also on YouTube and you're getting the shorts there and you're making newsletters out of it. So like, have you considered those numbers for your podcast and how that is a factor? And they're like, oh, no, I've never thought of it that way. And it's like, yeah, it's boosting all of this, right? Yeah. So it's like, okay, well, how is all of that content then collectively on all of these platforms working together? So like that's where this kind of stuff really comes in and like completes the picture, right? Because then it's like, okay, you are hitting all of these different channels, that you're getting everything out, you understand where everybody's moving through the system. And I think, and I would love your perspective on this, is like, how much do people tend to bounce around from your experience of like, hey, they looked at this thing, then they disappeared for 3 months and then they came back, you know what I mean? Like what does that buyer's journey generally tend to look like? How chaotic is it, I guess, is my question.
Very. And that's why I mentioned earlier, it's not a linear path. Someone can come into, our database through a content download months ago, and then they go dark, right? But then you see them resurface on an event registration 3 months down the line because they were really interested in the topic that we were talking about at the event. So that's something that you have to prepare for. That's one thing. And then two, the dark funnel is a thing, right? It's the reality of marketing right now. As much as I love attribution and I want to see the data, it's not always going to be there, and that's okay. And so that, I think, is where relationship with sales and getting insights from their conversations is so important. That's when I'm asking them, all right, you had this conversation with this prospect that, went dark for 3 months, but now he's here. What drove them to talk to us again? Was it, what they're seeing on social? Is it what they're seeing with our new content? Is it the one pager that we put together to support your conversation when you sent that follow-up email? So there's different, ways that you can look at that. And I will say, I mean, you brought up a good point, right? You don't need to create a bunch of content to be successful. You can take one piece and dissect it in different ways, in different formats to make that impact. And I think that's super valuable.
Yeah. So let's talk about this relationship side then a little bit with sales, right? Like,
Sure.
I mean, because it sounds like you're getting a collective buy-in, right? Of, hey, we're going to make all of this stuff, and also let's be on the same page of what this stuff is, and also tell me what's working and what's not. So like so correct me if I'm wrong here, but basically when you get prospects on a call, your salesperson will talk to them. You'll then figure out from your salesperson, okay, what things did this person engage with? And then you're incorporating that with the data and the other things that you're seeing to then refine this process.
Yes, so that's exactly what it comes down to. We also use Sybil, which has like AI capabilities. And so sometimes, I don't want to take up my AE's times because they're busy. They're trying to close deals. They're trying to source their opportunities. So using your platforms and AI to automate some of those insights and, run a report of, all right, what were the latest conversations around compliance, for example, is one that we're currently working on. What are those conversations? What were some things that prospects have highlighted on their conversations and like things that they're looking at? Then I take those insights and I start with the draft of what could this content strategy look like, and then go to sales and say, all right, just gut check me here. how is this, going to help you with conversations going down the line, right? Like if I create a compliance checklist, is that going to support your follow-up email when you're having when these topics come up in your calls? And so having that transparent kind of like relationship with them is very, very important. And then the last thing I'll say is just also the honesty and transparency with sales when something doesn't, resonate with an audience. Like giving them the permission to come to me and say, Sarah, you know what? That piece of content didn't really hit. Let's pivot, let's learn from it, and let's do something that does resonate.
Yeah, which is huge, right? I mean, all of this, it really boils down to just listening to people, right? Like it's hey, okay, well you've got these kinds of problems, and they're talking about it on the call with your salespeople. So then it's okay. Well, here, knowing what these issues are, let's make content that's addressing those questions, which makes it easier when they're starting top of funnel and working their way down to say, yes, these people get me. They know exactly what I'm going through. Like right? Like it's really what it is. Almost in a weird way. There's a show called The Rehearsal. This is like the most insane tangent, but there's a show called The Rehearsal that came out, and the idea was that if you could reenact a situation and practice it. So let's say you're going to have a tense conversation with your parents about something. Like you would practice this conversation in a simulator, essentially, until you got it perfectly right and you experienced every version of it. It's an insane show. It's completely crazy. But it's worth your time if you want your mind blown. But the whole thing was, over time, like these people had so many reps at these conversations, they knew exactly what to expect, had answers to everything, and you would see how that would evolve. For the same idea here, if you're getting dozens, hundreds, thousands, depending on the size of your company, of these kinds of conversations, I mean, that's everything, right? Like you're always guessing what people need. And when you have opportunities where they're directly telling you stuff, like that is the gift. And that gets overlooked so often. I mean, sometimes I've seen it where people, if they have like their customer service team, might be where they go and they mine that information. But I mean, sales, you're talking about people who are looking to buy. They're like, that's the whole point, right? You're bringing in new people. So when you get that together then, and you've got this information, you've got a clear idea of what these people are looking for, you're providing new content. What goes into, or what kinds of content do you like to make? I know things can be different kinds of shapes and sizes, and there's a lot of specificity there. But just generally, what kind of content do you really believe in?
I mean, I like to just change it up. I like to keep things different. I mean, everything from blogs to white papers to ebooks are always great, and they're really good standard content. But then there's also video, right? Like video content that you can use to repurpose with, like you said, pulling out little clips that we can put on LinkedIn ads or conversational ads that really pull in the people's attention. I think is so important, especially nowadays. Our attention span is so short. So really like catering to that. And just getting to the point and taking out all the fluff so that we're not just talking at them, but talking to them in a way where it's resonating. And I think that's where empathetic content, empathetic marketing comes into play. Like really knowing how to talk to your audience is key.
Yeah, I mean, they want to know that you understand them, right? And when you are making assumptions on their behalf, like it can be ugly, right? Like that's the exact kind of thing that, and they might not even be able to describe it, but they'll feel it. And so that's the thing that turns them off. They'll never be able to tell you why. You won't get it in a survey. They'll never reply to one. You just, but that's it. It'll completely sink you. So with that then, I mean, at this point, as we've kind of talked about it, you look at the overall picture of the content that you've produced and what that journey looks like. You're finding new ways to support those things within the system. You're tracking all of the data along the way to support that analysis. You're also talking with your sales team and getting analysis there. So now when you're in like this reiterating phase and re-implementation, I mean, what does it look like when you do that? Like, what are the kinds of things you see for growth, and how, if it's done well, I guess, what are the kind of results that people should expect?
So I think the first thing is it's important to know that not everything's going to be successful all at once, and you need to be okay to pivot. You need to and to pivot quickly, right? Like sometimes we push out a piece of content that's just not resonating, and that's okay. And so knowing when to make those optimizations and go in and make those changes that are going to drive success, or just changing direction completely is extremely important. And knowing also where your audience is spending their time in is going to help drive your content to be successful. Because we can, it's like if a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, like, did it actually happen, right? It's that kind of thing. I can create a bunch of content, but if I'm not pushing it out into the platforms and the channels that my audience is spending their time in, then no one's going to go ahead and look at that content. So understanding where they're spending their time in, understanding like when things are not going right and like how to change it is super important.
So if people want to check out all of this content that you're making, Sara, so thoughtfully, what is the best way to do that? How should they check it out?
Go to Inspectiv.com. We have a resource center that we're continuing to build out. We just went through a whole rebrand. We launched a whole new website, resource center being one of them. And so that everything's hosted in there. We're going to continue to push things out. And yeah.
There you go. All right. And always feel free to say hi on LinkedIn, right? People can always reach out there. So do that. Feel free to say hi to me on LinkedIn as well. I do exist there. People are allowed to say, please reach out. I'm happy to talk with you. But with that, I mean, that's everything for today. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this, Sara. Thanks for joining the show.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in and making the choice to listen to this podcast. If you liked what you've heard today, please don't forget to subscribe.